Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Poland will close its border with Belarus at midnight on Thursday, citing, quote, highly aggressive Russian-Belarusian ZAPAD 2025 military drills near NATO's eastern flank. The closure includes putting a stop to rail traffic, which facilitates the booming China-EU trade container traffic, which has doubled this year. What does this decision mean for Poland, NATO and Europe's security? Well, with us is David Kirichenko. He's Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. David, so Poland's closing its border, a lot happening right now on many fronts. But I'd like to start with Poland closing its border with Belarus in light of the ZAPAD 2025 military exercises being conducted between, which include Belarus and Russia. I think we have a soundbite from Prime Minister Tusk talking about the closure of this border, and I'd like to share that with you and then get your view.
On Friday, joint Russian-Belarusian military exercises will begin in Belarus, very close to the Polish border. From a military standpoint, the drills can be considered highly aggressive. We are also seeing a growing number of various provocations from Russia and Belarus, both within the country and, for example, the recent arrest of a Polish Jesuit in Belarus. This bears the hallmarks of hostile provocations, and therefore, for the sake of national security, we will close the borders with Belarus, including railway crossings, due to the ZAPAD exercises at midnight on Thursday night.
Okay, so clearly the Prime Minister sees the exercises as being threatening enough for him to close the border. But what's different this time is that he's also closing any railway crossings. Your view on this move?
Yes, I think it's certainly a precautionary measure that Poland is taking, and rightfully so. Poland has been the victim of a hybrid warfare campaign by both Russia and Belarus. If you think about Belarus, all the refugees or asylum seekers that they've been trying to push through the border into Poland and to create a migrant crisis within Poland's borders and create a larger political crisis within the EU in the hopes of drowning out any attention on both what Belarus and Russia is doing. The Russians have been conducting arson attacks in both Poland and other European countries and flying drones into Polish, Romanian airspace, the latest one being just a few days ago, of which Poland was unable to shoot down. And so we see that the Russians and the Belarusians are getting more aggressive with their actions. I think Putin certainly feels that he has an advantage on the battlefield and things are working in his favor. And so he wants to continue projecting this strength, this show of force against Poland and continue to threaten the Europe's eastern flank. And I don't think that Russia actually wants to have a direct confrontation with NATO, but of course the idea is over time continue to threaten, raise the stakes, and hope that the Europeans back down and Putin gets what he wants.
Well, there are a number of elements to this. Certainly, that is part of Putin's playbook to raise the stakes, be more aggressive, and so on. But the question is, are these exercises indicative of a potential kinetic attack?
Well, I mean, the point of these exercises is to hold the training to showcase the military strength and the abilities, but also prepare for a future exercise. And again, the Prime Minister spoke to the Suwalki Gap, and if there was to be a future incursion or attack, ideally, that's where the Russians would want to hit NATO's eastern flank on and break isolate that part of Europe and have its forces around both the Baltic states and have a direct encounter with Poland. So again, the point of a training exercise is to prepare and have your forces ready. And I think the Russians are wanting to showcase that they are learning lessons from the war in Ukraine and that they're trying to prepare for a direct conflict with NATO in the future.
Right. Now, President Lukashenko of Belarus is saying that this is a much smaller exercise. In fact, he's quoting a figure of 13,000 participants compared to 200,000 in last year. And the reduction in numbers, he says, is because it's an indication of how peace-loving Belarus and Russia are. How seriously do we take this statement?
I mean, I don't think that we give it any weight whatsoever. Yeah, of course, it could be, we don't know the whole truth of truly how much they're deploying. We have to wait and see how it plays out. But also, with the active war going on in Russia, the Russians are very occupied and need as much manpower as they can get to send into their meat grinder assaults in Ukraine. So it's very much not a sign that they're peace-loving and want peace, but could be just that they don't have the military might that they need to project in these exercises and have much fewer resources to spare.
Could it be that they are actually using fewer soldiers in these exercises and distracting the eyes of NATO and the European Union so that they can actually make some gains in Ukraine while everyone's looking away?
Of course, I mean, certainly a lot of these, events could be used to distract and try to sway attention away from negotiations and progress is being made. And certainly Europe has stepped up in the last few weeks or months and talks about security guarantees. We'll see where that ends up. And of course, the Russians don't want any meaningful progress on that. And they don't want Europe to actually commit to any tangible security guarantees for Ukraine. So the idea of holding these exercises can certainly help with diversion and diverting attention away from Putin's war in Ukraine and having the Europeans focus on some of these other diversionary events that they're putting up, like these exercises.
Right. I'd like to move on now to the economic implications of closing the border, because as you just heard Prime Minister Tusk say, railways were being closed down as well. Now, this particular railway is a pipeline of Chinese goods coming into the European Union, very heavily used, the new, if you like, Silk Road. Clearly, this is going to have an economic impact on China, but also within the EU, isn't it?
Yes, certainly. And I think the reason why they're doing it is not just for security measures, but also show that they have a way of deploying countermeasures or punishing the Belarusians and the Russians for the exercise and showing that the economic might of Europe or the economic repercussions of their actions, that they can still inflict pain on them. And I think Poland is showing that and showing them that they do have a way to respond. And granted, I do think it would be far more effective not just to have economic measures, but if a Russian drone, for example, flies into Poland to shoot it down, or even if it's in Ukrainian airspace approaching, being able to provide some of that air defense support and shooting it down and taking somewhat more bolder actions against the Russians and the Belarusians.
Right. Now, there is, again, I mean, staying with the economics of it at the moment, there are towns like Tiraspol, which is very close to the closures of the border, or the closed border. Should the European Union contribute to the economy of cities and towns like that, which are impacted so negatively by the war, between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I mean, it depends, I think, both on the the impact that these like towns are having from the war and even from the closures. I mean, it depends on how long the border is going to be closed for, and scaling or gauging what the impact is. And I think certainly if we think about the broader context of the war's impact on Polish the Polish population and the effects that it's having within the Polish elections and Polish politics, certainly Europe needs to keep a pulse on that and determine if it needs to step in and help alleviate some of these economic pressures on Poland, because we've certainly seen, whether it was in Slovakia or the close elections in Romania and some of these other border states near Ukraine, swinging to the far right, whereas more anti-Ukraine pressure, and all of this comes together, and some of the votes and important decisions being made on Ukraine and the wider European defense. So I think in the broader picture, it all comes together, and Europe certainly shouldn't let this slip out of their minds and keep a close attention on it.
Do you think Europe is being united enough in its action, its reaction, I suppose, to the Russian aggression, for example, in terms of support for Ukraine?
Well, Europe, I think at the start of the war, the amount of bickering and indecision around just how to enact certain sanctions against Russia, when you have so many different member states with different interests, it's really hard to combine it into just a unified decision maker that can just implement sanctions across the board. And there's a lot of negotiations that need to happen, a lot of individual interests that show potentially some of the weaknesses of the current structure of the European Union. But all in all, I think, especially after Donald Trump came to office, we've certainly seen more unity from the Europeans. But of course, you still have divisions. I think Ukraine is a hot topic, and was a hot topic in the recent Polish presidential elections, and it certainly was one in the Romanian elections, and I think right now in the Czech Republic. And so it ebbs and flows in the sense that you have some of these political pressures in the elections, and that.
So certainly moving towards greater unity, but we're not quite there yet. David Kirichenko, Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, thank you very much indeed for joining us and sharing your analysis. Have a good day, sir.
You too.
Thank
Cheers.
you. That brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, though. Lots more coming up. Goodbye.